Second challenge, it is, to me, it is the question of local ownership and whether communities truly own the process and outcome of transition efforts, or whether they're incorporated into the service of larger, extraneous, or even non-related policy objectives. So I watched the Olympics with horror, not because of what was happening in the Olympic Games, but because the City of London co-opted several transition groups to greenwash its image before the 2012 London Olympics. Now, some of those groups were strategic about their involvement with the City of London and the Olympic Games in trying to help paint a picture of the Olympics as green. And they said very clearly that they did it because they were they saw some value in it. They saw themselves getting some resources. They saw the opportunity to procure some material changes. But the larger issue over there is, well, actually, the really large issue is, as critics such as Alba point out, is that capitalism itself is the prime obstacle to any effective eco-localization effort. But in the London Olympics example, I believe that local ownership of transition efforts is an important first step in materially shifting the scale of change enabled by transition. And I think transition groups really have to watch out for that in terms of who they decide to build alliances with, because ownership patterns will change. I mean, this is, or stakeholder patterns will change, let's say that. And the third and final challenge is that the actual process of transition involves a fundamental shift in economic livelihoods, social practices, and political relationships. And in practical terms, the effort the movement requires may be difficult to sustain in the face of the scale of the change required. I live in New Zealand, which is a tiny island in the corner of the world. And I forget about the fact that the world is so big, and every time I fly to Los Angeles and the aircraft circles the city for ages, I look down at this concrete jungle and I go, what are we talking about? It is so easy to forget how big the world is and how much ecological devastation we have already done and how much undoing is required. The scale of change required to actually have a truly sustainable planet is immense. And for one movement to do it is kind of, it's a very big ask. But it is for these reasons that we need to continue to examine potential obstacles, potential material obstacles that face eco-local movements like this. Not only in terms of the material scale of the challenges involved, but also in terms, and I haven't talked about this at all in this presentation, also in terms of how these movements enact their own prefigurative politics and enact their own forms of democracy within the movement in terms addressing questions of internal power in terms of participation and decision making at local levels. And with that kind of self-examination, I think the movement itself will continue to be resilient in the face of its many challenges. So I'll close there. It's taken about 40 to 43 minutes. So